So it's Christmas time. We're talking about celebrating Jesus. And on that note, I want to just talk about celebration kind of in general. Have you ever heard the expression, have you ever heard someone being called a sack of potatoes? Has anyone ever heard that expression? Like, oh, Billy over there, he's just a sack of potatoes. What do we mean when we say that? He's just a sack of potatoes. It's an insult, first of all, right? You don't want to be a sack of potatoes, right? It's an insult. Sometimes I think some people mean that they're dumb. That's not really my understanding of a sack of potatoes, though. If I were to insult you and call you a sack of potatoes, I know what I would mean. I would be insulting you, saying that you lack motivation. You're passive. You just kind of sit there, a lump on the log. You're just kind of a stick in the mud. You know, you're just like a sack of potatoes. All you do is sit there. All you do is sit there. I believe there are a lot of Christians that when it comes to their faith, they're kind of like a sack of potatoes. They're not very motivated. Not very passionate. They're not excited. They don't seem to be going anywhere or doing anything when it comes to their own faith. So my message today, as we talk about the Magi, is I want to encourage you to not be a sack of potatoes in your faith. Have some drive. And the reason the story of the Magi makes me think of this is because I can't help but compare the Magi, the wise men of the East, with the wise men in Jerusalem. These chief priests and these scribes and these teachers of the law. I'm like, the Magi are doing all this, and these guys are coming out going, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it says this. Like, come on. Let me read the story to you to start us off here. It's Matthew chapter 2. I have it too, believe it or not. I just lost it. Well, it's on the text here. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We have seen his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "Oh, in Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied. "For this is what the prophet has written, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Oh. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. And on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. These Magi. Who are these guys? Have you ever wondered that? The text does not clearly state who they were. All we have is a guess. But it's a pretty good guess. There was a man who lived in the east hundreds of years before they did, who was in charge of all the other Magi, all the other wise men of their day, all the stargazers, the astronomers, and the astrologers. His name was Daniel. Daniel had been taken to Babylon when he was a teenager. He lived there for 70 years. And somewhere between the age of 84 and 86, he was thrown into a lion's den. And he survived. And they pulled this Daniel out, this prophet of God, this Jew. And they made him in charge of everyone, all of these magi, all the wise men. He was in charge. They all reported to him. And this Daniel wrote a book. It's kind of popular. You may have heard about it. It's the book of Daniel. About his story, his life, from childhood to being taken to Babylon, all through his life until his Daniel in the lion's den story. And in his book, he foresaw and predicted a future kingdom. Writes about it in his book several times. That there would be this kingdom that would last forever, that they would have this Babylonian kingdom and the Persian kingdom and the Greeks and then the Romans, and then there would come this kingdom not like those, and it would rule forever. And he talks about this leader, this Messiah, this Son of Man who would rule, this one who could come into the presence of the Ancient of Days, this mighty one. And do you know what Daniel wrote? He actually wrote when it would take place. He put it all in the book. From the time of a certain decree by a Roman king, a Persian king, all the way to the establishment of the kingdom of God would be 70 years, 7 times, 490 years. Wow! All written in this book. And the king, when he pulled Daniel out of the lion's den, he said, everyone needs to respect this guy's God. This guy has it going on. So this is the best guess that we have. These magi are Persian wise men. They might be living in Babylon or close to there. And the best guess is they had access to Daniel's book. That's the best guess, and it's a good one. You have to have some other kind of information there. A star doesn't tell you everything, doesn't it? It's like, oh, there's a new star. There must be a king of the Jews. You got to have some more information there. And so the idea is this, that perhaps they had that book of Daniel, and they've read it, and they see the star, and they make the connection. How many years has it been? Like 450 years. We're getting close, aren't we? That guy's about ready to be born. There's the star. I think that's him. And this connection, maybe they had even more information, or maybe that star was speaking in ways that we don't understand. But more than likely, I think the best guess is they had Daniel's book and they're following it. Regardless, here's what I think is interesting, that the Magi were very interested in what God was doing. They were very interested in this. Extremely interested. They seem to be knowing what's going on. Meanwhile, the religious leaders who know all the stuff don't seem to have a clue. They don't seem interested at all. Do you know, if it was Babylon, that's 500 miles or more, depending on the terrain of the ancient world and their roads. Best guess is maybe between 4 and 6 months just to get there. Not talking about the journey back home. How much food do you have to pack for a year-long journey? What supplies are you taking with you? What's that goodbye like when you kiss your wife goodbye? I'm taking off. I'm going to go find this King of the Jews. I'm going to go worship him. say goodbye to the kids. I'm not going to see you for a while. See you next year. This is no FaceTime moment. You're taken off. And you're not going to see him for a while. Meanwhile, these religious leaders, Jerusalem, 6 miles to Bethlehem. 6 miles. Some people show up and say, we've come to worship the King of the Jews. And I'm like, huh? Like, where's that supposed to be? Oh, Bethlehem. Yeah, just right over there. Okay, thank you. And they don't go? They just went back to work? Is that what happened? How come when we put out our nativity, we don't put out the shepherds and the magi and the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the scribes? Where are they in the nativity? Why didn't they show up? Because they weren't interested. They were they just a sack of potatoes? Where's some interest in this? This is a big deal. This is Jesus. This is the Messiah you've been waiting on. It's 6 miles away. Travel. Go there. And they didn't. They weren't on the move. And the Magi, as much as we might even critique them, I think, imagine if you got into a flying DeLorean and you flew back into time. And you just walked around and you said, hey, I'm curious. Do you think King Herod is a believer? You just walked around Jerusalem and said, do you think he's a believer? I think they would have talked very harsh. He was a horrible guy. But I would think they would have said, yeah, I guess our King of the Jews, I mean, he says he believes. I don't know. How about your chief priests? Are they believers? Well, yeah, of course they are. How about your teachers of the law? Well, yeah, they believe. They do? Yeah. How about your scribes? Of course they believe. How about those Gentiles living months away, hundreds of miles away from you, studying the stars? Do you consider them believers? And like, no, of course not. And I think whenever I read this story, I'm just reminded that belief is nothing without trust. And that each one of us needs to be more invested in our own faith. I think there's a lot of people that say they have belief. Do you have any interest in prayer? Do you have any interest in Scripture? Do you have any interest in the church or Christian community? Is there anything that would cause you to study more or do more or be more? Don't be a sack of potatoes. Let us celebrate our Jesus and celebrate our faith. Be interested in what God is doing. That's what the Magi were. They were very interested. And more than that, it's more than just being interested in it. It's that they went, God's getting ready to do something. It's not just being interested in it. They were expecting God to do something. Oh, man, here it comes. Oh, we're getting close to that time frame. He's going to be born. There's going to be this magnificent kingdom. It's going to change the world. They were expecting God to do something big. That's why they packed their bags and took off. It's not just because they were curious. It's because they had this spirit of expectation that God was going to transform everything they knew. Meanwhile, you come to the chief priest, and what were their expectations? Yeah, I don't know, he's over there, I guess. At least that's what it says. Yeah, the Son of Man, someone who can enter into the presence of the Ancient of Days. You don't want to go check. You have no expectation that he's going to be transforming this world. And I think there's a lot of individuals who just don't seem to have very much passion or expectation of what God is going to do in their life. And I guess that's my question to you this morning. do you expect God to actually be doing something in your life? There's a family member that I would see once, maybe twice every year. And I really struggled to have a conversation with him. Every time I would try to bring up something I think he might interest him, he just didn't seem interested. I'd like, hey, sports! And he's like, yeah, just sports. Okay. World events? Politics? No. I was always struggling, and there was one time, it was while I was leaving, he mentioned how much he loved fish. And he said, yeah, fish. And I was like, oh, bye. And I drove away going, oh, there was something that interested him. So this is what I did. A week before the next year, so next year, it's a whole year later, I'm going, that's my one connection to this guy. So the whole week before I left, I was studying fish. And I'm trying to find something interesting, something that maybe we could talk about, that maybe he wouldn't know, or something I could ask about. And I'm studying something that really isn't something I get excited about, but I was trying to connect with him. So I show up. I come in. I just want to attack him right away. Fish! I'm like, okay, it's like, here we go. I'm ready. I am ready to engage. I am ready. And I bide my time a little bit, and finally I look over, I said, hey, I was reading something the other day. Did you know this and this and this, and I saw this, and while I'm talking, he takes a step away from me. And then he kind of nods his head and takes another step. And as I'm talking, I just look down, I'm looking at this distance, and then he takes another step away. And then finally he goes, that's interesting. And he turned, he just walked in the next room. And I'm like, okay then. Man, I'm trying to find some connection here, and I couldn't find it. Is it possible God ever feels like that with us? Here this God is going, do you get excited about anything? Because it's time. You say you're a believer? How are you showing your trust in me? What do you get excited about? What's your passion? I want to see some fire in you. You say you believe? Well, let's see that belief. Let's see it in action. Don't be a sack of potatoes. Be like the Magi. I don't know what the problem was with the chief priest, but I love what was going on with those Magi. I can't imagine traveling for a whole year just to see a little baby. So much trust and belief. This is what God is doing. It was fulfilled. This child is going to change the world. And there's something else. It's even more than that. It's more than being interested. It is this excitement. True excitement about what God was doing. They had this. I might take just a little time out and talk about how I really don't understand the whole star thing. Does anyone here think that they understand it? I don't. I don't get that star. It's like they see a star, okay, and they see it towards the west. I get that, so they could follow it. I don't know how you follow a star to a house. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how you go, am I underneath it? Oh, no, wait. Look, that star is right over this house. Look. I don't get that. They followed the star to the house. So I'm assuming there's some divine properties in this, or maybe I'm just really dumb and there's some heavy math that someone can do that I don't get, that you can actually identify a particular house from a star. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing some information, but what I'm not missing about the story is this. When they saw the star was pointing to the house, they were overjoyed. They were excited. They had some passion. They had There was something in them that would cause them to celebrate. And so they went, there it is. This is the house. The star's pointing right to it somehow. And they come over and they're excited about what God was doing. And they showed that this excitement wasn't just brand new. It didn't, they traveled this whole time and, oh, now we're excited. They were excited the whole time. They brought treasures with them. Here, they unpacked them. Here's gold and frankincense and myrrh. We always assume that there's 3 of them because there's 3 gifts. But it is possible for 5 men to give 3 gifts or 15 men to give 3 gifts. We know that, right? But regardless, they come and they present these gifts to the Messiah, a baby that can't even appreciate him. And they get down and they worship him. They get down on their knees. And they put their head on the ground and they worship Jesus. This is more than just being interested. This is this true excitement and awe of God. They are not a sack of potatoes. Their faith is alive. Their faith is alive. Meanwhile, those religious leaders that knew so much, they're going about their day. Why aren't they excited? At least Herod has some emotion. At least he's angry. At least he's wanting to kill people. There's something there at least. Don't be a sack of potatoes. Let your faith be alive in you. Don't be dead. And don't do that around Christmas time especially. This is a time to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. And finally, I just look and I love the urgency that they had. This urgency, we have to go and we have to go now. That these magi could have put this off a little while. They have a few years left. That kingdom of God's not going to start for what? 34 years? 35 years if we're counting right? We're good. We'll mark the time that the star appeared. We'll show up at this time. They're like, we see his star. Let's go. We got to make the nativity scene. There's some people that wonder, maybe they didn't quite make it. Maybe they're a little bit later. Actually, as I'm studying, I don't mind having them there. And they go and they travel, and there's this urgency. We have to go see this one who's been born, King of the Jews. Where was the urgency in these religious leaders? So I just bought a new house, and the fire alarm is too close to our oven. It's not because Rachel's a bad cook, but it keeps going off. It's too close. A little smoke comes out of that oven, and all the alarms go off in the house. I'm learning different responses by different kids based on the fire alarms. Do you know how a young child responds when there's a fire alarm and they're not asleep? They come running down. What's going on? Right? The fire alarm. What's going on? It's like they're urgent. They know this alarm means you vacate the house. You get out. This fire alarm can go off and I won't see some of my kids. Those older teens, they just kind of, where were they? There's a fire alarm going off. No response. Still quiet up there. Did they hear it? Did they hear the alarm? Yeah, they heard it. They're cool. It's just a fire alarm. That's all. It's just a fire alarm. Yeah, different urgencies for different kinds of people. I'll admit, the fire alarm is going off right now for me, and I no longer respond. I just think, well, Rachel's cooking. Or she was. Darren, you're doing all the cooking now. There's an alarm going off. And I'm curious if you notice it. God is doing work all around you. He's doing work in your life. He wants to grow you and mold you and draw you in, and he wants to be with you, and he has plans for you. There's this alarm going off in your family. It's like he's wanting to act. There's this alarm going off in your church. Like he's doing something here. Something's going to happen. Do you notice what God is doing? Are you interested in him? Are you expecting him to do something? To be a God who is engaged with us? Are you excited about the work of God? Is there any urgency within you going, I hear him speaking. He's calling my name. He's getting ready to do something. Are you ready to follow him? I want to ask you to never be a sack of potatoes when it comes to your faith. If you're going to be unmotivated about some earthly affair. But when it comes to your faith, make it a priority and follow the example of the Magi and be willing to come and to truly celebrate Jesus Christ. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, you are a good and a faithful God. And I just want to thank you for surrounding me with people that love you, that are excited about you, and that want to see you work. Lord, I pray right now that you would ignite a fire within our hearts. Draw us close to your throne. Lord, you are working in our lives. You are not a God that started this whole universe and then abandoned it. You've been completely engaged. You are the creator and you are the sustainer. And you are here right now in this place. When we leave, your Spirit goes before us. Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes and ears. And if there would be an opportunity to worship and celebrate you, Lord, I pray that we would always take hold. It's in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we pray.